From the very beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, one reality has stood out. Ukraine has been the weaker side on paper. It does not have Russia's huge advantage in manpower, and it cannot rival the Kremlin's enormous reserves of tanks, armored vehicles, and military hardware. But there is one area where Ukraine has repeatedly proven it can compete and often outperform, and that is strategy. That edge in tactical thinking is one of the main reasons Kyiv has managed to stay in the fight for so long. Ukrainian planners and field commanders have shown again and again that they can outmaneuver and outsmart an enemy that is often rigid, predictable, and reckless. One of the clearest examples of this is a tactic commonly described as bait and bleed, a method used constantly across the front to turn Russian assaults into deadly traps. Today, we're going to break down exactly how that tactic works. Before getting into the mechanism itself, though, it's important to understand the larger setting. In a traditional invasion, there is an attacking side, the invader, and a defending side, the nation under attack. The defender usually builds strong defensive positions along the edge of its territory, and the attacker tries to smash through them. That is what creates the classic front line. One side dug in and defending ground as fiercely as possible, the other shelling and assaulting those positions in an effort to punch holes in the line and seize territory piece by piece. From there, the war often becomes a contest over which side can better hold or break the line. For generations, that has been the basic structure of warfare, and it is why changes in front lines and territorial control have traditionally been such useful indicators of who is doing well and who is losing ground. Ukraine's military leaders, however, quickly understood that following this conventional model would not work in their situation. The reason is simple. They are fighting a much larger and materially stronger opponent. If Ukraine tried to defend every single inch of ground in the old-fashioned way, it might slow Russia down for a time, but the long-term outcome would remain the same. Eventually, sheer numbers, relentless pressure, and brute force assaults would erode those defenses and crack them open. Put simply, if Ukraine had chosen to stand and hold everything at all costs, it would only have delayed an outcome that favored Russia. The capture of more territory in Donetsk, Luhansk, and beyond, with the possibility of deeper advances toward Kyiv and other major parts of the country. That was never a viable option for Ukraine. So its commanders needed another answer, a way to defend territory and repel attacks without burning through their own troops in the process. What they realized was that, at times, it made more sense to temporarily surrender ground, preserve their forces, and then hit back to retake that same position when conditions were more favorable. That idea became the core of what is now known as the bait and bleed tactic. At its heart, it is a four-stage method, and it is brutally effective. The first stage is setting the trap and placing the bait, and this is the foundation of the entire tactic. The goal is to draw Russian assault squads, often groups of around 35 to 50 dismounted troops, into carefully chosen areas. Ukraine does this by exploiting one of its greatest advantages. It is fighting on familiar ground. Because the war is being fought on Ukrainian soil, its troops understand the terrain, the routes, the natural choke points, and the local geography. They use that knowledge to identify the best locations for ambushes and kill zones. After choosing those areas, they shape the battlefield using mines, barriers, wire, trenches, ditches, concrete obstacles, and other defensive measures that channel the enemy toward a specific path. Once Russian troops run into those obstacles, they are forced into a limited set of choices. They can try to spread out and find another way around, risking confusion and loss of cohesion. They can try to push directly through the obstacles, which wastes time and can cause casualties. Or they can follow what appears to be the safest and easiest route toward the Ukrainian position. Very often, they choose that apparently safe option, and that is exactly the decision Ukraine wants them to make. That brings us to stage 2. In this war, concentration is dangerous. If Ukraine masses too many troops in one position, Russia can destroy them with artillery. The same rule applies to vehicles and other equipment. Large visible clusters are easy prey for drones and indirect fire. So instead of stuffing trap areas with large numbers of defenders, Ukraine often stations only small teams there. Their purpose is not to stand their ground until the last man. Their job is much more specific. When they see Russian assault troops entering the designated area, they engage just enough to provoke them, firing a few shots, making contact, and encouraging the enemy to push harder toward that point. Then, after judging the size and density of the Russian force, those Ukrainian soldiers carry out a prearranged withdrawal to safer positions farther back. To an outside observer, it may look like panic. It may appear as if the Ukrainian troops are scared and running for their lives, but that is not what is happening. In fact, that illusion is part of the plan. The retreat is meant to convince the Russians that they have found a weak point and that the defenders are collapsing. Ukraine wants the assault squad to become overconfident, move in, and begin securing the position, without realizing they have just stepped directly into a trap. And very often, that is exactly how it plays out. Russia has remained highly predictable throughout the war. Its forces have repeatedly relied on similar methods, showing little capacity to adapt and continuing to use the same costly, inefficient tactics despite repeated failures. When Russian troops see Ukrainian defenders pulling back from a position, they often interpret it as a chance to gain ground and press an advantage. So they advance. But Ukraine is watching the entire time. The battlefield is saturated with surveillance drones. Both sides constantly keep unmanned eyes overhead, scanning the terrain, identifying movement, and relaying information to forces on the ground. Ukrainian drone teams observe the Russian assault as it moves in, while feeding frontline units real-time intelligence about how many troops are involved, what weapons they are carrying, and whether vehicles or support assets are nearby. Every detail matters for what comes next. Stage 3 is the strike itself, the counterattack. Once the Russian troops have entered the position and start treating it like a fresh success, Ukraine activates the trap. Fire suddenly crashes down on the assault squad from multiple directions. Mortars and conventional artillery are often the first tools used, hitting fast and hard before the Russians can fully understand what is happening. FPV drones, strike drones, and loitering munitions can then be used to finish off survivors, destroy vehicles, and hit any troops trying to pull out. The position that looked secure only moments earlier becomes one of the most lethal places on the battlefield. And this is all possible because Ukraine planned it in advance. The artillery crews, drone operators, and other support elements are already in place, already prepared, and ready to fire almost instantly. On top of that, because Ukrainian troops were occupying that same ground just moments before, they know it intimately. They know the exact coordinates. They know the terrain features, the sight lines, the cover, the escape routes, and the conditions around the site. That familiarity makes it much easier to deliver accurate and devastating fire. In many cases, Ukraine also establishes secondary kill zones. If Russian troops try to withdraw, Ukrainian planners often already know which directions they are most likely to take because surrounding routes have been shaped with mines and obstacles. Those fallback routes can then be covered by more artillery, more drones, and more waiting ambushes. That means the attack does not stop with the initial strike. Any troops trying to run, any reinforcements trying to enter, and any resupply vehicles attempting to help can be targeted as well. Even if the assaulted unit manages to radio for support, that support can be destroyed on the way in. Again, drone coverage is crucial here. Drones provide the constant surveillance and live information stream that make this whole system possible. They allow Ukraine to see what the enemy is doing at nearly every moment, which in turn helps Ukrainian commanders stay ahead of the Russians and react with speed and precision. And then comes the fourth and final stage, retaking the ground. Once the Russian assault squad has been destroyed or forced out, the same Ukrainian troops that pulled back earlier can move back into the position. They reoccupy it, re-establish surveillance, and prepare to repeat the exact same process when the next Russian attack comes. And this is the part many people fail to notice. Before going further into why the tactic works so well, If this kind of battlefield analysis is what you enjoy, be sure to subscribe to the Military Show. We break down military developments like this every week. Now back to the tactic itself. In many ways, this method reflects the huge difference in how the two sides think about war. On one side, there is Russia, with a much bigger army and a continued ability to draw in more manpower to replace losses. Because of that, Russian commanders have repeatedly leaned on extremely wasteful methods. Again and again, they have shown they are willing to feed men into deadly assaults, repeating the same mistakes in the hope that mass and pressure will eventually produce results. Human losses are treated as acceptable so long as some territory is taken. In their view, land gained equals progress. That is why Russia is often willing to spend lives for tiny scraps of ground, which explains the constant stream of small assault groups attacking Ukrainian positions along the front day after day. Ukraine thinks very differently. Its approach is centered far more on conservation, planning, and making tactical choices that preserve personnel, reduce losses, and catch the enemy in vulnerable moments. Because Ukraine has fewer troops, it cannot afford to waste them. Its commanders also do not want to view their soldiers as disposable. Unlike Russia, they are not fixated on every tiny fluctuation in the front line or every minor patch of terrain. Their priority is to keep Ukrainian casualties low while inflicting heavier losses on the enemy. That is why strategies like bait and bleed fit Ukraine's needs so well. Everything about this tactic is built around shielding Ukrainian troops from unnecessary danger. When Ukraine launches the counterblow against Russian assault teams, it usually does not rely on infantry charging in with rifles to clear the position. Instead, it leans on artillery, drones, and loitering weapons, systems capable of delivering severe destruction without exposing large numbers of soldiers to direct combat. Even during the retreat phase, Ukrainian troops do not simply run blindly. They disperse and occupy smart positions in the surrounding terrain. That way, even if Russia tries to answer with fire or launch a follow-up attack, it becomes much harder to wipe out the whole Ukrainian element at once. Ukrainian commanders also maximize their home ground advantage. They use terrain intelligently, choosing defensive spots that are hard to flank and easier to support. They pair that with continuous drone reconnaissance to gather battlefield data and shape every decision around it. Nothing is random. Everything is calculated, timed, and structured to tilt the odds as far in Ukraine's favor as possible. In essence, the bait and bleed method is about turning Russia's strengths against it, neutralizing its manpower advantage, preserving Ukraine's own lines, and avoiding unnecessary sacrifice. Of course, it is not foolproof. The tactic carries risks. If Ukraine delays too long before springing the trap, Russia can get its own artillery or drone teams into supporting positions. If that happens, Ukrainian surveillance could be disrupted, and without accurate aerial awareness, coordinating the strike becomes much harder. That is why the whole concept depends on speed and precision. Ukraine cannot afford hesitation. Every phase, from the initial contact to the withdrawal to the counterattack, has to happen quickly and cleanly. If the timing is right, Russian forces do not get the chance to properly establish themselves or set up their own support systems. That helps Ukraine keep control over those trap zones and reuse them again later. The outcome of this tactic is something we have seen repeatedly during the war. At times, Russian troops appear to punch through Ukrainian defenses. It may look like they have captured a meaningful position or secured a foothold for further advance. Russian commentators celebrate. Nationalist military bloggers talk as if major victory is near. Putin receives glowing reports from subordinates presenting these moves as important gains. Then, sometimes only hours or days later, Ukraine retakes the same positions and restores the previous situation. This has happened in places like Donetsk, Luhansk, Sumy, Kharkiv, and other areas. Again and again, Moscow appears to have gained momentum, only for Kiev to reverse it soon after. The crucial difference is that, in many of these exchanges, Russia loses far more men and equipment than Ukraine does, and it often has little to show for it because the land it seized is lost again almost immediately. Over time, this kind of repeated attrition is taking a severe toll on Russia's war effort. First, it is consuming manpower at an enormous rate. Every destroyed assault squad means dozens of soldiers killed or wounded, many of whom will never return to combat. In the past, Russia may have been better able to replenish such losses, but that challenge is growing. Many of those willing to go fight have already gone, whether out of ideology, pressure, or financial incentives. Those still at home are increasingly reluctant, regardless of how much money is offered. Second, these repeated failed assaults are likely undermining morale. Every time a Russian unit seems to gain a quick success only to be trapped and destroyed soon after, it reinforces the idea that these attacks are essentially suicide missions. More Russian soldiers are likely beginning to understand that they are being sent into situations with terrible odds of survival. Over time, that can only reduce willingness to obey orders. It may lead to more refusals, more desertions, more panic withdrawals, and more surrender at the first sign of serious danger. And all of that makes it even harder for Russia to achieve meaningful gains on the battlefield, not just large offensives, but even small advances. In other words, through this death trap style of warfare, this rope-a-dope method, Ukraine has made Russian success dramatically harder to achieve, and the rest of the world should be paying attention. Because Ukraine is demonstrating that in an era defined by drones, constant surveillance, and rapidly evolving battlefield tactics, the old principle of hold the line at all costs no longer works the way it once did. In fact, blindly clinging to ground can be catastrophic. In a battle space where drones can provide non-stop reconnaissance and immediate intelligence, frontline units must be more flexible, more mobile, and more tactical. Sometimes that means giving up ground for a short time in order to strike back more effectively and reclaim it on better terms. That is not cowardice. It is not panic. It is intelligent, economical warfare. In the long run, it makes far more sense to abandon an unimportant patch of muddy ground for a few hours and save dozens of soldiers' lives than to lose those lives trying to defend land that has little real strategic value. So the next time you hear that Russia has captured more territory or Ukraine has lost a position, do not automatically assume it means what it might once have meant. In this war, those headlines can be misleading. You can learn more about Ukraine's tactic of accepting short-term setbacks for longer-term gains in this video, which explores the reality behind Kyiv's tactical retreat around Pokrovsk. Or you can watch this one to examine Putin's alarming plans for 2 million of his own citizens. And be sure to subscribe to military analysis, breaking developments, and in-depth battlefield coverage you won't